Lisa Barnes sat at her workstation on the bridge of the UES Liberty. The ship was big and strong, one of humanity's best vessels that traveled between the stars. Lisa's job was to listen to radio signals from space. Most nights were quiet, but she always stayed alert. You never knew what might come through the darkness between worlds. The year was 2387. Humans had spread across many star systems and built colonies on dozens of planets. Other alien races knew about humans now. Most of them were scared. They called humans Deathworlders because Earth was such a dangerous place to live. While other species evolved on safe, peaceful worlds, humans had to fight every day just to survive. This made humans tough and strong, but it also made other aliens nervous. Lisa wore her blue uniform and kept her brown hair tied back. She had been doing this job for 3 years. Tonight felt different somehow. The ship was on patrol near the edge of human space, far from the busy trade routes where most aliens traveled. Out here, space was empty and dark dot at 2 in the morning. Something came through her speakers. It was weak and full of static, but it was definitely a signal. Lisa sat up straight and turned up the volume. The voice was speaking Galactic Standard, the language most aliens used to talk to each other. But this voice was broken and scared. "Please help us," the voice said. It was hard to understand through the static. "Slavers took our people. Our children are dying. We know humans are dangerous, but please, we have nowhere else to turn." Lisa felt her heart race. She had never heard anything like this before. The voice sounded desperate and afraid. She quickly recorded the message and ran it through the ship's computers to clean up the sound. The signal came with coordinates, numbers that showed where in space it came from. Lisa looked at the star charts. The location was far away, in a system that humans had never visited. It was an empty space where no government claimed control. Lisa picked up her communication device and called Captain Jake Morrison. Even though it was late, the captain answered right away. All ship captains had to be ready at any time. "What is it, Barnes?" Captain Morrison asked. His voice was calm but serious. "Sir, I picked up a distress signal. You need to hear this," Lisa said. 10 minutes later, Captain Morrison stood behind Lisa's chair, listening to the cleaned-up message. With him were First Officer Amy Carter and Chief Engineer Ryan Davis. Amy was tall with blonde hair and smart blue eyes. Ryan was a big man with strong hands, who knew everything about how the ship worked. They played the message 3 times. Each time, the alien's fear came through clearly. The voice belonged to someone who had run out of hope and was asking the most dangerous species in the galaxy for help. "Computer, analyze the voice pattern," Captain Morrison said. The ship's computer worked for a moment. Then a calm electronic voice said, "Voice pattern matches known recordings of Zelani species. Zelani are herbivores from the Kepler 442 system, known for peaceful nature and advanced medical knowledge." "I've heard of them," Amy said. "They're artists and healers. Never hurt anyone. What would slavers want with them?" Ryan crossed his arms. "Same thing slavers always want. People to sell." Captain Morrison studied the star chart. The coordinates were 3 days away at full speed. That was far from any help if they ran into trouble. "Sir," Amy said, "we should call this into Earth Command. This sounds like a job for more than one ship." Lisa watched the 3 officers think about what to do. She knew that humans had strong feelings about slavery. It was something that had happened on Earth long ago, and humans had fought a terrible war to stop it. Now, no human would allow slavery anywhere they could stop it. "Barnes, send a priority message to Earth Command," Captain Morrison said. "Tell them we have a confirmed distress call from the Zelani species. Include the full recording and coordinates. Request immediate support for a rescue operation." Lisa's fingers moved quickly over her controls. The message would travel through space faster than any ship could fly. Earth Command would receive it in just a few hours. While they waited for a reply, Intelligence Officer Karen Lopez came to the bridge. Karen was good at finding information about other species and what was happening in the galaxy. She had black hair and wore glasses that made her look very smart. "I found some information about recent Zilani activity," Karen said. "Or rather, the lack of it. 3 months ago, Zilani traders stopped coming to the border markets. Their medical supplies haven't been seen anywhere. Some people thought they were just keeping to themselves. But they were being attacked," Amy said. "It looks that way," Karen agreed. "I also found reports about something called the hegemony. They're a group of slavers who work together. They capture rare species and sell them to rich collectors." Captain Morrison's face became hard. "Collectors who buy people." "Yes, sir. The hegemony has been growing stronger. They have their own warships and bases. Most governments are too scared to fight them." Ryan laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "They haven't met humans yet." 4 hours later, Lisa's communication system made a sound that meant an important message was coming in. She opened the channel and heard the voice of Admiral Helen Brooks. "From Earth Command, U.E.'s Liberty. This is Earth Command. Operation Mercy Strike is approved. Return to Mars Naval Yards immediately. A fleet is being assembled. The Zilani will not face this alone." Captain Morrison smiled for the first time since hearing the distress call. "You heard the Admiral. Set course for Mars, best possible speed." As the U's Liberty turned toward home, Lisa looked at the coordinates where the desperate voice had come from. Soon, those slavers would learn what happened when someone asked humans for help. They would discover why other aliens called humans Deathworlders, and why that reputation was both feared and respected across the galaxy. The message had been sent. The fleet would gather, and the Zilani would learn that sometimes the most dangerous species in the galaxy were exactly the friends you needed. Admiral Helen Brooks stood on the observation deck of Mars Naval Yards, watching the biggest fleet assembly in human history. Ships arrived every hour from across human space. Some came from Earth, others from the colony worlds that humans had built among the stars. All of them came because someone had asked for help. Helen was 55 years old, with gray hair and sharp green eyes. She had been fighting in space for 30 years, and she had never seen anything like this. When Earth Command sent out the call for volunteers, more people wanted to help than they had ships for. The main construction bays worked day and night. Welders fixed damage on older ships, while technicians loaded weapons and supplies. The air smelled like metal and fuel. People moved everywhere with purpose. Everyone knew they were preparing for something important. "Admiral, the final ship count is in," said Commander Lisa Hayes, Helen's assistant. Lisa was young, but very smart. She carried a tablet computer with all the fleet information. Helen turned from the window. "How many?" 42 ships total. 12 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, and your flagship. The medical ships and supply vessels will follow behind us." Helen nodded. It was a good fleet, but she knew they would need every ship. Intelligence reports said the hegemony had more than 40 warships protecting their slave operations. The battle would not be easy. What about personnel? All ships are fully staffed. We have volunteers from every branch of the military. Marine Colonel Steve Parker has assembled 5,000 combat troops for ground operations. Helen had worked with Steve before. He was a big man with broad shoulders and a thick beard. His Marines trusted him completely because he always led from the front. If anyone could rescue people from slaver bases, it was Steve and his troops. And Dr. Rachel Stone? She's aboard the medical ship Healing Light with her full team. She's also brought specialists in alien biology and psychology. The Zilani will need medical care and counseling after what they've been through. Dr. Stone was famous throughout human space for her work with alien species. She was small and quiet, but she had saved more alien lives than any other human doctor. If the Zilani could be helped, she would find a way. Helen walked through the shipyard to inspect the fleet. The flagship UE's Vengeance was the biggest and most powerful ship humans had ever built. Its weapons could destroy smaller ships with a single shot. Its armor could take hits from the strongest enemy guns. But Helen hoped they wouldn't need to use all that power dot in the Marine preparation area. Colonel Parker was talking to his troops. The Marines wore their combat armor and carried weapons designed for close fighting. These men and women had trained for years to fight in the worst conditions. They came from Earth, where everything tried to kill you, so they knew how to handle danger. Remember, our job is to save lives, not take them, Steve told his Marines. We go in fast, we secure the civilians, and we get them out. Anyone who tries to stop us gets what they deserve, but the mission comes first. The Marines nodded. They understood. Humans were good at fighting, but they were even better at protecting innocent people. Lieutenant Commander Nick Walsh worked in the fleet's planning center. Nick was thin with brown hair and quick hands. He was the best tactical officer in the human navy. His job was to figure out how to win the battle with the fewest losses. The hegemony has 43 ships, Nick explained to the other officers. Most of them are older designs, but they have good shields and weapons. They're arranged in a defensive pattern around the slave processing stations. What about planetary defenses? Asked Captain Tony Miller. Tony commanded the stealth ships that would sneak into the system ahead of the main fleet. Energy cannons on the surface, plus fighter squadrons. Nothing we can't handle, but we need to move fast. If they have time to organize, they might start killing prisoners. Helen listened to the planning session. She had fought many battles, but this one was different. Usually, humans fought to protect themselves or their colonies. This time, they were fighting for strangers who had asked for help. Admiral, Lisa said, walking up with her tablet. We're getting reports from across the galaxy. Other governments are asking what we're doing. Helen smiled. What are you telling them? The truth. We're ending a slave operation. Some of them want to send their own ships to help. And the others? They're nervous. They think we're being too aggressive. Helen laughed. They'll understand when it's over. How long until we're ready to leave? 6 hours, Admiral. All ships will be fueled and supplied. Helen nodded and walked back to the observation deck. Below her, thousands of people worked to prepare the fleet. They came from different worlds and different backgrounds, but they all shared the same goal. They would not let the Zilani suffer alone. On the communication deck, messages poured in from across human space. Families of the crew members sent good wishes. Other colonies offered supplies and support. Some messages came from alien species who had heard about the mission and wanted to help. But the most important message came from the Zilani system itself. Lisa Barnes, still aboard the UES Liberty, had detected more distress calls. The signals were weaker now, which meant fewer Zilani were still alive to send them. They're running out of time, Helen said after reading the report. Commander Hayes stood beside her. The fleet will be ready soon. I know, but sometimes soon isn't fast enough. That evening, Helen called all the ship captains together for a final meeting. The room was full of men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting others. Some were old like Helen, with gray hair and scars from previous battles. Others were young, eager to prove themselves in their first major operation. Tomorrow we jump to the Zilani system, Helen said. Intelligence says the hegemony has been operating there for months. They've taken hundreds of thousands of civilians and killed anyone who tried to resist. The room was quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. The hegemony thinks they're safe because they're far from any government that might stop them. They think their numbers give them an advantage. They're wrong on both counts. Captain Morrison of the UES Liberty raised his hand. What are our rules of engagement? Helen's voice became cold. Anyone who surrenders will be treated according to interplanetary law. Anyone who fights will discover why other species call us Deathworlders. Anyone who harms prisoners will face the full fury of the human fleet. The captains nodded. They understood. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy for being dangerous and violent. Usually, they tried to show that they could be peaceful too. But when someone was hurting innocent people, humans stopped being peaceful. One more thing, Helen said. When we win this battle, and we will win, other slave operations will be watching. They need to understand that humanity will not tolerate slavery anywhere we can reach. This is just the beginning. As the meeting ended, Helen looked out at Mars through the station windows. The red planet had once been empty and dead, but humans had brought it to life. They had built cities and farms and turned it into a new home. Humans were good at taking impossible situations and making them better. Tomorrow, they would do the same thing for the Zelani. The slavers would learn that when someone asked humans for help, humanity answered with everything they had. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zelani system like thunder in space. 42 warships appeared at the same time, their weapons charged and shields glowing with energy. The sight sent shock waves through. The hegemony forces who had never seen such a coordinated attack. Admiral Helen Brooks stood on the bridge of the UE's Vengeance, watching her tactical display. Red dots showed enemy ships scattered around the system. Blue dots showed her own fleet, perfectly positioned for battle. Everything had gone according to plan. All ships report ready for combat, said Commander Hayes. Good. Open a channel to the enemy fleet. The communication screen lit up with the image of Supreme Commander Vextar, the leader of the hegemony forces. He was a large reptilian creature with green scales and yellow eyes. His uniform was covered with medals and symbols of rank. But Helen could see fear in those yellow eyes, even though he tried to hide it. I am Admiral Helen Brooks of the Earth Defense Force, she said. Her voice was calm and steady. You are conducting illegal slavery operations in this system. Release all prisoners immediately and surrender your vessels. Vextar's forked tongue flicked out nervously. You have no authority here, human. This system belongs to the hegemony now. Leave immediately or face the consequences. Helen almost smiled. The consequences? Let me tell you about consequences. In 30 seconds, my Marines will begin boarding your prison stations. In 60 seconds, my fleet will engage your ships. In 10 minutes, every Zelani in the system will be free. You are outnumbered, Vextar hissed. We have 43 ships to your 42, and we have hostages. Attack us, and they die. Helen's expression didn't change. You made 2 mistakes, Commander. First, you assumed numbers matter more than training. Second, you threatened innocent people in front of humans. She cut the communication channel and turned to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Commander Walsh, begin the operation. Nick Walsh had been waiting for this moment. His fingers moved quickly over his controls, sending coded signals to ships throughout. The fleet. The battle plan they had practiced for days began to unfold. Unknown to the hegemony, Captain Tony Miller's stealth ships had been moving into position since the moment the fleet arrived. Using advanced technology that bent light around their hulls, the human stealth vessels were invisible to enemy sensors. While the 2 fleets were talking, Miller's ships had already reached the prison stations. The first explosions came from the largest prison facility orbiting the second planet. Colonel Steve Parker's Marines had cut through the outer hull and were fighting their way inside. The hegemony guards were used to dealing with weak prisoners, not human soldiers in powered armor. Contact from Colonel Parker, reported the communications. Officer, Marines are inside the primary facility. Heavy resistance, but they're advancing. On the prison station, Steve Parker led his Marines through metal corridors filled with smoke and alarm sounds. The hegemony guards were tall, insect-like creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes. They carried energy weapons and wore light armor, but they had never fought humans before. "Move fast, move hard," Steve called to his Marines. These bugs don't know what hit them. The human soldiers moved like a force of nature through the station. Their armor was thick enough to stop most energy weapons. Their own guns were designed to work in any environment, from the frozen moons of Jupiter to the volcanic fields of Mars. The hegemony guards fell back in panic in space. The main battle began when Admiral Brooks gave the order to attack. The human fleet split into 3 groups, each one targeting a different section of the enemy formation. The hegemony ships tried to maintain their defensive positions, but human tactics were too fast and flexible. The U's Liberty, commanded by Captain Morrison, led a group of destroyers against the enemy's left flank. The smaller human ships used their speed to dart between the larger hegemony vessels, hitting them with precise weapon strikes, and then moving away before the enemy could respond. "Their shields are down on the lead cruiser," reported the weapons. "Officer, target their engines," Morrison ordered. "Disable, don't destroy. There might be prisoners aboard." The human fleet followed strict rules of engagement. They tried to capture enemy ships when possible, only destroying them when they had no choice. But the hegemony had no such restrictions. Their ships fired at everything, trying to overwhelm the humans with sheer firepower. It didn't work. Human ships were built to survive in the harsh environment of space around Earth, where radiation storms and asteroid impacts were common dangers. Hegemony weapons that could destroy most alien vessels barely scratched human armor. "Admiral, enemy flagship is trying to escape," reported Lieutenant Walsh. Helen looked at her display. Vexstar's command ship was moving away from the battle, along with 6 other vessels. Intelligence suggested these ships carried high-value prisoners, possibly including Zilani children. "Captain Miller, intercept that convoy. Don't let them reach the jump point." Tony Miller's stealth ships dropped their invisibility and appeared directly in front of the fleeing hegemony vessels. The enemy ships were fast, but they weren't faster than human interceptors that had been designed to chase down pirates and smugglers. "This is Captain Miller to enemy convoy. Stop your engines and prepare to be boarded." Vexstar's voice came back full of rage. "You cannot stop us all, humans. We will escape with our prizes." "Watch us," Tony replied. The stealth ships opened fire, with weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. Precise energy beams targeted the enemy engines, while electromagnetic pulses shut down their computer systems. One by one, the escaping ships went dead in space. Back on the prison station, Colonel Parker's Marines had reached the main holding area. What they found there made even hardened soldiers stop and stare. Thousands of Zilani were packed into metal, cages barely large enough for them to stand. The aliens were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large, gentle eyes. Many were injured or sick. Children cried for parents who might already be dead. "Medical teams, get in here now," Steve commanded. "We need doctors, and we need them fast." Dr. Rachel Stone arrived with her medical team just as the Marines secured the area. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but her expression became hard when she saw the conditions the Zilani had been kept in. "These people haven't had proper food or water in days," she said, examining the nearest prisoners. "Some of them are dying." "Then we better work fast," Steve replied. "My Marines will handle security. You save lives." Throughout the system, similar scenes played out on a dozen different stations. Human Marines fought through hegemony defenses, while doctors rushed to treat alien prisoners who had given up hope of rescue. The coordination was perfect, the result of years of training and planning. The space battle turned into a rout as hegemony. Ships tried to flee in all directions. Human destroyers chased them down, while the heavy cruisers finished off the stations and weapon platforms. Some enemy ships managed to escape, but most were captured or destroyed. Admiral Brooks received reports from across the battle zone. The news was good, but the cost was becoming clear. The hegemony had been operating in this system for months, and they had killed many Zilani who tried to resist. Final count from Colonel Parker, Commander Hayes reported. 37,000. Zilani rescued from the stations. Medical teams estimate about half will need intensive care. Helen nodded grimly. 37,000 saved, but intelligence suggested the hegemony had taken nearly twice that number from the Zilani homeworld. The others were probably already sold to collectors across the galaxy. What about enemy casualties? 14 hegemony ships destroyed, 29 captured. Enemy personnel losses are estimated at 12,000. And our losses? 3 destroyers heavily damaged, 47 personnel wounded, 6 killed. Helen felt the familiar weight of command. 6 humans had died to save 37,000. Aliens. It was a good trade by any military standard, but she knew the families of those 6 would not see it that way. Admiral, the communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's coming from the Zilani capital city. Put it through. An elderly Zilani female appeared on the screen. Her blue skin was wrinkled with age, and her large eyes were filled with tears. When she spoke, her voice shook with emotion. I am Silandra, elder of the Zilani Council. We saw your ships in our sky. We saw the slaver stations burning. Is it true? Are our people free? Helen stepped forward. Yes, Elder. Your people are free. We came as soon as we received your distress call. Silandra collapsed to her knees, overwhelmed by relief. The humans came. The Deathworlders came to save us. I cannot believe it. After so many months of darkness, there is light again. The battle was over, but Helen knew this was just the beginning. The hegemony had operations throughout the galaxy, and now they knew that humans would come for them. The real war was about to start. Colonel Steve Parker walked through the largest prison station with Dr. Rachel Stone, both of them trying to understand the full horror of what the hegemony had been doing. The metal corridors were filled with the sound of crying and voices speaking in the musical language of the Zilani. Human Marines stood guard while medical teams worked to save lives. I've never seen anything this bad, Rachel said, checking on a group of Zilani children. The young aliens were thin and scared, their large eyes following every movement. These children have been separated from their families. Some of them don't even remember their parents' names. Steve felt anger building in his chest. He was a soldier who had seen combat on a dozen worlds. But this was different. The hegemony hadn't just captured people for work or ransom. They had been treating intelligent beings like animals to be bought and sold. How many can we save? He asked Rachel, looked around the medical area where her teams were working. Human doctors and nurses moved between beds, treating aliens whose biology they were still learning about. Most of them, if we can get them proper care. But the psychological damage will take years to heal. In another section of the station, Intelligence Officer Karen Lopez was examining hegemony computer systems with a team of specialists. The aliens had tried to destroy their records before the humans arrived, but human computer experts were very good at recovering deleted information. Colonel, you need to see this, Karen called out. Steve walked over to where Karen was standing in front of a large display screen. Numbers and locations covered the screen in neat rows. It looked like a business report, but Steve knew it was something much worse. These are shipping records, Karen explained. The hegemony has been operating like a corporation. They target species that can't defend themselves, capture as many as possible, then sell them to buyers across the galaxy. How many operations are we talking about? Karen's face was grim. 17 different star systems. Hundreds of prison facilities. Conservative estimates says they've enslaved over 2 million sentient beings in the past 5 years. Steve stared at the numbers. 2 million people, stolen from their homes and families, sold like property to anyone with enough money. Who buys them? Rich collectors mostly. Some go to illegal fighting rings. Others end up as servants on private estates. The hegemony doesn't care what happens to them after the sale. Show me the locations. The display changed to show a map of local space. Red dots marked hegemony operations, scattered across dozens of star systems. Some were in areas controlled by weak governments. Others were in lawless regions where no one would interfere. We can't hit all of these with one fleet, Steve said. No, but we can start. And once word gets out about what happened here, other species might find the courage to act. On the bridge of the UES Vengeance, Admiral Helen Brooks was having a similar conversation with her senior staff. The scale of the hegemony's operations was larger than anyone had imagined. 17 systems, she said, looking at the same intelligence. Data Karen had discovered. This makes them one of the largest criminal organizations in the galaxy. Lieutenant Commander Nick Walsh studied the tactical display. Most of their operations are concentrated in 3 main areas. If we could coordinate attacks on all 3 simultaneously, that would require over 100 ships, Commander Hayes pointed out. We'd need support from other governments. Helen nodded. Then we'll get it. Send copies of this intelligence. Data to every major government in the region. Make it clear that the hegemony is a threat to everyone, not just humans. While the fleet commanders planned their next moves, the rescue operation continued throughout the system. Transport ships arrived to carry the freed Zelani back to their homeworld. Medical ships provided treatment for the injured and sick. Supply ships brought food and clean water to people who had been given barely enough to survive. Captain Tony Miller's stealth team had captured Supreme Commander Vextar and brought him aboard the UES Vengeance for questioning. The reptilian alien sat in a detention cell, his yellow eyes filled with hate and fear. You have made a terrible mistake, human, Vextar said when Helen came to see him. The hegemony is vast and powerful. You cannot stop us all. Helen sat down across from the prisoner. Maybe not, but we can make a good start. Tell me about your operations in the other systems. I will tell you nothing. You will eventually. But first, I want you to understand something. My species has experience with slavery. We know what it does to people, both the victims and the ones who profit from it. We fought a war to end it on our own world, and we're prepared to fight a bigger war to end it out here. Vextar laughed, but the sound was nervous. You are one species among hundreds. You cannot police the entire galaxy. Watch us, Helen said, standing up. Your organization just made themselves the enemy of every human in space. That's 4 billion people spread across 50 worlds, all of whom now consider you a target. Down on the Zelani homeworld, Elder Silandra stood with a group of human diplomats in the capital city. The Zelani city was beautiful, with tall spires that seemed to grow out of the ground like crystal trees. But many buildings were damaged from hegemony attacks, and the streets were too empty. Before the slavers came, our city had 2 million inhabitants, Silandra explained. Now we have fewer than half that number. The rest were taken or killed, trying to defend their families. Captain Morrison, representing the human fleet, nodded sympathetically. We'll help you rebuild. But first, we need to make sure this never happens again. How can you do that? The hegemony has ships and weapons. They will return when you leave. Morrison smiled. We are not leaving. Admiral Brooks is establishing a permanent human naval base in this system. Any ship that threatens the Zilani will have to go through us first. Silandra's large eyes widened with surprise. You would do that for us? But we are strangers to you. Not anymore. You asked for help, and humans don't abandon people who trust us. Back on the prison station, Dr. Stone was working with a group of Zilani who had been separated from their children. The adult aliens were desperate to find their young ones, while the children were too traumatized to recognize their own parents. This is going to take time, she told Colonel Parker. These families have been torn apart. Some of the children were taken to other systems before we arrived. It might be impossible to reunite all of them. Steve watched a young Zilani child, sitting alone in a corner, refusing to speak to anyone. Then we'll find them. However long it takes, wherever they are, we'll bring them home. That could mean searching dozens of worlds. Then that's what we'll do. The rescue operation took 3 more days to complete. Human ships carried freed prisoners back to the Zilani homeworld, while construction teams began building the new naval base. The base would be small at first, but it would grow. More importantly, it would send a message to other potential slavers that this system was under human protection. On the final day, Admiral Brooks received a communication from Earth Command. The message was short but significant. Operation Mercy. Strike approved for expansion. Additional fleets being assembled. The hegemony operations will be eliminated. Helen smiled as she read the message. The Zilani rescue had been just the beginning. Soon, human fleets would be moving against slaver operations throughout the galaxy. The hegemony had made the mistake of asking for help from people who had nowhere else to turn. Now they would learn what happened when you threatened innocence. In front of Deathworlder's dot, as the human fleet prepared to leave for their next target, Elder Silandra came aboard the UES Vengeance to thank Admiral Brooks personally. The elderly Zilani was accompanied by a group of children who had been rescued from the prison stations. Admiral, my people have decided to send representatives to Earth, Silandra said. We want to speak to your leaders, to tell them what you have done for us. That's not necessary, Elder. We did what anyone should do. No, Silandra replied firmly. You did what only humans would do. Other species in this galaxy have heard the cries for help, but only humans answered. The galaxy needs to know that the Deathworlders are also protectors. As the Zilani delegation prepared to depart for Earth, one of the rescued children walked up to Admiral Brooks. The young alien was small and thin, but his large eyes were bright with intelligence. Thank you for saving us, the child said in careful galactic standard. When I grow up, I want to be like humans. I want to help people who need it. Helen knelt down to the child's level. You already are helping, just by being brave enough to survive. Your people will rebuild, and they'll be stronger because of what you've been through. The child smiled. The first time Helen had seen any of the Zilani look truly happy. It was a good sign. The Zilani would recover from this tragedy, and they would remember who had come to help them when no one else would. But across the galaxy, millions of other beings were still trapped in hegemony facilities, waiting for rescue. That might never come, unless humanity decided to do something about it. 3 months after the rescue of the Zilani, Admiral Helen Brooks stood before the human Colonial Council on Earth. The great assembly hall was packed with representatives from every human world, military officers, and media from across human space. But the most important people in the room were the Zilani delegation led by Elder Silandra. The elderly Zilani stepped up to the speaking platform, her pale blue skin seeming to glow under the lights. When she began to speak, her musical voice carried clearly through the hall. Honored humans, she said, I come before you not as a politician or diplomat, but as a grandmother whose grandchildren were stolen from their beds by slavers. 3 months ago, my people had given up hope. We had sent distress calls to a dozen governments, but none answered. Only humanity came when we called for help. The hall was completely silent. Helen could see tears in the eyes of some representatives as Silandra continued her testimony. The hegemony took nearly 1 million of my people. They separated children from parents, sold our scientists to collectors, and killed anyone who tried to resist. We thought we would all die as slaves. Then the humans came. Silandra paused, looking around the room at the faces watching her. Your Admiral Brooks could have sent 1 ship to investigate. Instead, she brought 42 warships and 5,000 Marines. Your people risked their lives for strangers they had never met. 6 humans died saving my people. We will never forget their sacrifice. The council chairman, an older man named Director Paul Chun, stood up when Silandra finished speaking. Elder, on behalf of all humanity, I want you to know that we consider your people to be friends and allies. But we also need to discuss what comes next. Admiral Brooks rose from her seat. Director, if I may, the intelligence we recovered from the hegemony facilities shows this is bigger than anyone imagined. 17 star systems, hundreds of facilities, over 2 million enslaved beings. This isn't just a rescue operation anymore. It's a war. Director. Chun nodded grimly. Admiral, what do you need? 3 full battle fleets, support from our allies, and authorization to pursue hegemony operations wherever they exist, regardless of local politics. The room erupted in discussion. Some representatives worried about the cost and commitment. Others argued that humanity couldn't police the entire galaxy. But Elder Silandra's testimony had made one thing clear. If humans didn't act, no one would. The motion is approved, Director Chun announced after the vote. Operation Freedom Strike is authorized. Admiral Brooks, you have whatever resources you need. As the council session ended, Helen walked with Silandra through the gardens. Outside the building, Earth's flowers were blooming in the spring air, a sight the Zilani elder had never seen before. Your world is beautiful, Silandra said. It's hard to believe such a peaceful place produced such fierce warriors. Helen laughed. You haven't seen our storms or our predators. Earth taught us to be strong because we had to be. But it also taught us to protect the weak. The galaxy is lucky to have humans in it. We're lucky to have friends like the Zilani. Your people's medical knowledge has already saved human lives. This partnership works both ways. Meanwhile, across human space, the largest military buildup in history was taking place. The Mars naval yards worked around the clock, building new ships. Recruitment centers were flooded with volunteers. Word of the Zilani rescue had spread, and millions of humans wanted to join the fight against slavery. Colonel Steve Parker, now promoted to general, was training Marine units for the upcoming operations. The assault on the hegemony would require landing troops on dozens of hostile worlds. His soldiers needed to be ready for anything. Remember, we're not just fighting enemy troops, he told a group of new recruits. We're racing against time to save lives. Every minute we waste means more innocent people suffering in those camps. Dr. Rachel Stone had established mobile medical units that could deploy with the fleets. Each unit was equipped to treat multiple alien species and handle the psychological trauma of freed slaves. She had also been working with Zilani doctors to develop better treatment methods. If physical injuries heal, she explained to her medical teams, but the damage to their minds and spirits takes much longer. Some of these people have been slaves for years. They've forgotten what freedom feels like. Captain Tony Miller's stealth ships had been upgraded with new technology based on intelligence gathered from captured hegemony vessels. His ships could now penetrate even the most advanced security systems, allowing Marines to rescue prisoners before the enemy could. React. Hit fast, hit hard, get out clean, Tony briefed his crews. A hegemony is expecting us now. They'll be ready for a fight, but they won't be ready for ghosts. 3 months after the council meeting, the first Freedom Strike fleet launched. From Earth, 120 ships under Admiral Brooks' command, supported by vessels from allied species who had finally found the courage to act. The Rigelian Navy contributed 12 cruisers. The Centauri Federation sent supply ships and medical vessels. Even some former hegemony clients switched sides when they saw which way the war was going. The fleet's first target was a system called Kepler 438, where the hegemony operated 3 large slave markets. Intelligence suggested over 100,000 beings from a dozen species were held there. The facilities were heavily defended, but human tactics had evolved since the Zelani rescue. All ships, this is Admiral Brooks, Helen announced as the fleet prepared to jump. Today, we begin the end of the hegemony. Every person we save today is a victory. Every slaver we stop is justice. Remember what we're fighting for. The jump to Kepler 438 went perfectly. The human fleet appeared in precise formation, with stealth ships already moving toward their targets. But this time, the hegemony was ready. Over 60 warships waited in defensive positions, while fighter squadrons launched from hidden bases. "They've been expecting us," reported Commander Hayes. "Good," Helen replied. "Let them see what happens when Deathworlders come prepared for war." The battle was fierce, but one-sided. Human ships cut through enemy formations with surgical precision, while marine assault teams stormed the slave facilities. The hegemony had superior numbers, but humans had superior everything else. Better weapons, better armor, better training, and most importantly, better motivation. The rescue operation saved 93,000 enslaved beings from 17 different species. Some had been prisoners for less than a month. Others had been slaves for years, their hope worn down to nothing. All of them learned that freedom could come from the most unexpected source. The dangerous Deathworlders that other species feared dot as the freed prisoners were loaded onto transport ships. Helen received a priority message from Earth Command. Similar operations were underway in 5 other systems, all of them successful. The hegemony's empire was crumbling as human fleets struck at its foundations. "Admiral," Commander Hayes said, "we're receiving surrender offers from hegemony commanders in 3 systems. They're willing to release their prisoners in exchange for safe passage." Helen considered the offer for exactly 2 seconds. "Tell them they can surrender unconditionally and face trial for their crimes, or they can fight and face the consequences. No deals, no negotiations." The war against the hegemony lasted 6 more months. Human fleets, supported by growing numbers of allied vessels, struck at slaver operations throughout the galaxy. Some hegemony commanders surrendered when they realized they couldn't win. Others fought to the end, usually dying in the process. Final battle took place at the hegemony's main headquarters, a massive space station hidden in an asteroid field. Supreme Commander Vextar had escaped from human custody during a prisoner transfer and returned to lead the last desperate defense of his criminal empire. Admiral Brooks led the assault personally, commanding the UES Vengeance as it punched through the station's defenses. General Parker's Marines fought their way through corridors filled with the last fanatic defenders of the slaver organization. When they finally cornered Vextar in his command center, the reptilian alien was holding a dead man's switch connected to bombs throughout the station. Thousands of prisoners were still aboard, and he threatened to kill them all rather than surrender. "You cannot stop slavery," he hissed at General Parker. "It has existed for millions of years. It will exist long after your species is dust." Parker looked at the alien who had caused so much suffering. "Maybe, but it won't exist here, and it won't exist now. That's enough." The standoff ended when a Zelani prisoner, one of the scientists who had been captured months earlier, managed to disable the bombs from a maintenance tunnel. Vextar's last threat was removed, and with it, the last hope of the hegemony. The war was over, but the work continued. Over 2 million enslaved beings had been freed during the campaign. Finding their homes, reuniting families, and helping traumatized survivors heal would take years. But humanity had committed to seeing it through. On the first anniversary of the Zalani rescue, Admiral Brooks stood once again on the observation deck at Mars Naval Yards. But now, she was watching construction of a different kind. Medical ships, transport vessels, and peaceful exploration craft were being built alongside the warships. Elder Silandra joined her at the window,